panel, crimes. Crime itself is morally unjust, but when this is a central character in a movie, when this is a glorified value in the movie industry, in society, it just makes it a domino value and makes it to a more extreme. That's why I'm extremely proud to propose in this debate. Let's go just for framing. Number one, glorification. Glorification means when you're praising a value in this narrative, we're proposing the better imaging, they're proposing the better imaging of criminal central characters. Number two, note that when you're glorifying one character, this means that society holistically perceives this as good. In this case of the debate, we are saying that trying to perceive criminal action is in the most good way is just ridiculous. Number three, why does the problem actually occur? Glorification of criminals as central characters make the audience feel sympathy for the character, making an attractive backstory, morally respectable positions are all bad frames set by this series. Rooting for it to make evidently easy due to the character being painted as a three-dimensional, deep character. And all this doesn't mitigate the basic morals of to go against crime, but it spreads the notion that evil is justified. Number four, also acknowledge that when these are central characters, the movie itself is trying to put the story as its main purpose or central material. Five, the problem of this is that teens, for example, are attracted to the bad guy narrative. When they hit puberty or not, whatnot, it is very likely that these actions seem very attractive and cool to them normalized. Also, people get bullied, or bullies, for example, as a minority, bullies will take the incentive from here, justifying the bullying actions as good and the vulnerable, but just because they have a backstory. What do these movies actually look like? Number one, these movies generally have attractive and deep backstories of why we should root the criminal, which is a central character, and why we should accept them as our main character. So uncritical and vulnerable eye, they'll just justify the actions without them knowing. Well, you'll see them self-rooting for that person. Why is this so? Because these movies look like trying to put these drugs as a first priority. It looks like them reaching out to cocaine when they're feeling sad or depressed. But I think that it's extremely exacerbated when it comes to glorification of the specific value. Our counter narrative here that we want to propose is number one. The counter narrative that we say is that we will never justify crimes, whether those crimes are at the best shoplifting or at the worst drug trade or murder. I think in any of those cases, linking that with a backstory perpetuates the mindset in young people to justify those actions. Criminals should not be justified or glorified in any way. The story should clearly show how they're bad to the bone, at least explain clearly why their attractive species traits cannot justify their horrible actions. The narrative in their side is clearly problematic. Our counter narrative is that the action of criminal characters should be clearly labeled as wrong and problematic. But what does this actually look like? Number one, movie studios directly telling in the media the disclaimers about why you should not do this, or not make stories where the bad succeed in the action for some reasons. But B, glorifying criminals by an attractive backstory of crime and defending crime is a worse influence on society. Because in these series such as Breaking Bad, the main character becomes ruthless and performs drug trade. I think even in Narcos, it justifies the use of cocaine as a solution to sad and depression. So at the end of the day, when you're correlating this central character with an attractive backstory and correlates with crimes and drugs as a solution, that's just telling people that if you're linked with a backstory and a vulnerable reason to do it, you can actually justify doing it. And since it's our glorified society. The front of my argument, does anybody have any POIs? 3, 2, 1, knowing game. Let's go to the first argument about bad influences since it glorifies the action of crimes, which is principally unjust. Number one, because it justifies criminal action, evil and criminal action. Why is this true? Because when there's a point of glorification in society, this looks like trying to justify the crimes perpetuated by the central characters because it is a central character because of their tragic backstory or social inequality. We need to acknowledge your judge that this means that the global will believe that they're minorities in society or getting left out in the world will try to justify the evil or crime actions as a solution because of society glorifying those crimes as right. Here, the audience is influenced to think that the central character has no choice but to commit these crimes and result in inequality and tragic losses. I think that's very absurd. So what does it actually look like? We said once people glorify the notion that central characters weren't influenced by external factors only, this always correlate back into thinking that the crimes are also justifiable because they were in a very tragic loss or a very tragic environment. For example, we'll give you an example of Maleficent, for example, where Maleficent was portrayed as a fairy who was betrayed by other people. But then she decided to put up as a reason that betrayal to put a wage war against the kingdom as a whole. Just like these series shift the audience's attention to the backstory, not the consequences of the crimes. That is why what viciously perpetuates the already harmful cycle. But what does this actually matter? So the justification of evil actions can influence the public to disregard rules and laws. It spreads the unlawful norm that if everyone has an uncomfortable, unfortunate circumstance, social inequality, or as a minority, it just violence to take extreme crimes. Because it already recognizes from the very start that the criteria here, who is able to better prove that to the society the crime what justifiable action is actually the most justified and it's actually moral. We sort of dealt delta here is very simple. Number one, we able to take that as a bet, where we say acknowledge that the global is very like prone to fall into these traps, where you only glorify those actions if they have an attractive backstory. We said our second argument that we need to stress is impressionable to vulnerable, specifically as a stakeholder. So why is it so? Let's purpose and spectrum of stakeholder analysis. The more serious problem of glorification of criminal ways gets, it is that the movie makers takes it from an entertaining perspective, because the movie like exactly tells us that these movies are made for entertaining the audience, not for any other reason. What does it actually look like? We said that the glorification here implies that these series will specifically be famous or actually trending among the movie makers or among the industry, where a lot of movie directors and producers will start to take these more in place because social norms are already so. Because when you're glorifying a specific character, you're glorifying a specific norm. You're just saying that, hey, this is right, this is good, right? Because you're saying that when you're saying that the central characters should are justifiable to have criminal action, we said that at the end of the day, this being misperception. Why does it matter and what's the impact? The delta here in the debate is simple. The comparative is the note that this vulnerable is the most gullible. It means that when these in the point of glorification of a single norm in a series, it means that it's going to affect three spectrums of stakeholder analysis: the teens and the vulnerable, but also society as a whole. Let's first talk about around teens. So the bad guy image looks extremely cool in puberty, where they're hitting puberty as well. It's hard to resist the sweet types of criminal action that apparently movies support, because in their narrative, they're going to push this fact that, hey, if you have a justifiable reason or the tragic backstory for a criminal action and you're a central character, this means that it's justifiably good. In our delta here, for a comparative counter narrative, we're actually getting a disclaimer that this should not happen. We're never justifying evil actions. We will tell the teens at the very start that they should not, and this already leads to consequences, right? But also lower the justifiable barrier of bad actions, right? We said that also happens in the sacred of adults, where, for example, it happens naturally in your mentality without you knowing. Unconsciously, these movies make you shift your attention to the actual consequence of what happened from these crimes, rather than actual the reason from like the actual what actually impact of this is, right? But when you're trying to shift the other's attention and glorifying this and criminal action, this means the audience rather focus on trying to like correlate the backstory to justify actions, rather than actually think, hey, if I use cocaine, what happens, right? Their rationality is going to be lost in like the glorifying value of how social norms work. At the end of the day, we were able to prove to like counter narrative much more like simple, much more like simple, but also help the stakeholder analysis as a whole. We're able to tell the spectrum of analysis, where, for example, number one, we're able to tell adults in their unconscious mentality. Number two, we're able to help teens in their unconsciously cool mentality also as well. But number three, we're able to help the movie industry as a whole. That's I'm incredibly proud to propose.
Judge acknowledge that in stories, and the status quo in the media is only representing these characters as a good guy and a bad guy. They blatantly blame in these Hans and Frozen as the bad guy. They blatantly blame just Cruella and Ursula just like trying to put these efforts to explain why they're behaving that way psychologically. So we believe that by Gov's side, they're not preventing any glorification of why criminals are trying to live in this way in certain series. They disallow any type of social discussion to help the status quo's rehabilitation and fixation of status quo's problems. More than proud to oppose. So before I go into my characterization, firstly, I'll do the rebuttals. So firstly, we believe that they have a too soft case, Judge. They said that they will never justify that case because like people or these like teenagers can imitate, but we don't think like we'll never justify their crime, but we're rather just saying that this is the problem in the society. We will never justify that. We're just saying that since this is the cause, we get to know that cause through these media. We believe that this will actually reflect the society, right? We believe that this societal reflection is crucial. But then second, their first argument was about like the really harmful cycle and how this will influence people. No, thank you. I'll get it later. So we believe this is the accountability for the citizens and the viewers to know which is whether wrong or right? So I'll further elaborate in my characterization. Lastly, on the last rebuttal, we believe that most of the stories, the ending of the story is bad, right? They usually go to jail, or for even these Narcos or Breaking Bad. We believe that all of the stories kind of end bad, right? We say that this actually gives a moral lesson to these people rather than just actually influencing these people in a negative way, right? We say that it's actually giving positive effects to these people. Now moving on to characterization, 4 points. A, people will just take it as an entertainment rather than moral guideline. So, but even if they do, they will know the consequences, so they will not do it. But second, for the bad guy, they will not be really described. And we say that in the current current society, it is too oversimplified, right? So this is, we believe that this is very problematic in the status quo. For example, the Joker in the Bad Knight. The Joker is just characterized as a bad guy, right? We don't talk about why they're bad. They're just described and crazy and mad. However, we want to say that we want to know the backstory of these bad guys, right? We want to know why they did it. We will not justify them, but we still want to know what was the cause. What is the society in the problem that made them a bad guy rather than a good guy, right? Lastly, C, the regulations. Some content regulation exists like online with like we can like systems or infrastructures in place to restrict these contents that are inappropriate for these teenagers, right? But we say that actually we don't need these regulations. Why? Audiences are the ones who should have the accountability and the responsibility of distinguishing what is right or wrong and understanding that these series are a factor for entertainment, not a thing that you should be imitating or get influenced, right? The responsibility for these distinctions are made up to these individuals. These are not the creators' fault of these series. So therefore, the implication here is that these viewers see these series with criminal factors and elements for entertainment, not as a guidebook for how they should act ethically. Now, moving on to our arguments. Our first argument is that there is a big necessity to shift the narrative. So first, they only focus on the good guy, not on the bad guy story. So firstly, we say that it's too oversimplified in the current society. First, media gave no chance for representation, but second, like Narcos or Breaking Bad are the first ones, so these representations are needed. Yes, I'll get the POI.
If you say that media is only for entertainment purpose, how do people get to learn a moral lesson?
Okay, you should listen to my speech in my first time because like I already explained how the ending is bad. So yeah, but before the media was just considered these figures as bad guys and good guys, right? So it was very oversimplified. We didn't really think about the root causes of these crimes. So for instance, maybe the people like distrust law enforcement, so they don't report it to the police. Maybe they're actually corrupt officers in a lot of bad neighborhoods, right? Maybe it isn't because we're bad people, but there is a proper reason for it. So we believe that even though we don't actually justify that, we say that we can find the problem of this. Rehabilitation, maybe people commit crimes because of these property, right? Because the problem is before the media has always basically not shown that, right? We believe that it is the media's role to do it right now, to show what is happening, and right? So they don't have the chance representation in the first place, and we tell you that that is problematic, Judge. There is a significant necessity for this to be shifted in this current status quo, so we don't regret that. But second, there's deterrence. A, social awareness. We believe that there's an educational value and awareness. We believe that these series can actually educate the public and these teenagers about the criminal justice system, the psychology of the crimes, and what is actually happening behind the story, right? We believe that these portrayals can actually help them grow and know that what is bad or what is good or what is happening in certain society. As I continuously explained, we believe that there is a societal reflection and this can actually criticize the society. Series featuring crimes give like a really critical viewpoint to these problems and these perspectives for the society's infrastructure, right? These can expose issues like poverty, corruption, rich and poor gap, and making these viewers in a broader perspective of these problems. So why is glorification important? Firstly, we believe that this analyzes the psychological behind the crime, right? So first, the crime only focuses on the good guy and how they're kind of like, oh, you're the bad guy. And that, however, we want to focus on the bad guy. We continuously say that we want to know what's happening, right? We try to get the best actor to represent them, and the bad guy is not characterized and not described in detail about the bad guy's background story and where these acts come from, right? So they're often overly simplified. So for example, in our side, what will happen if this gets like a lot of like views? We believe that this can identify social discussions. People will start to discuss what is wrong or right. Like oh, this was the problem, and this should be solved in society, right? We believe that this social discussion is why is glorification important. By these glorifications, this is how these social discussions can come out, right, Judge? We believe that finding the root causes and actually leading to social discussion is important. What will happen in their side? We believe that in their side, this will not happen. In our side, Like even rehabilitation can happen. Why? Rehabilitation can happen because most people will know that, and like this is wrong, right? So we believe rehabilitation from criminals can also happen inside this infrastructure in our side. However, in their side, what will happen? There will be no social discussions, no rehabilitation, as well as this. They're just regretting of the societal reflection. Therefore, I'm more than proud to oppose. Thank you.
Judge, at the top of my speech, I want to ask the question, what does glorification look like? I think Claire already told you this, that glorification is very simple. Glorification from a society in this criminal life look like saying that criminal life was justified. Whether it was for physical or mental reasons, that's what it looks like, justifying any criminal life as long as you have something that's for physical reasons or for mental reasons. For example, like maybe you're like just a psychopath, or maybe for physical reasons, for example, like you were poor. On our side, we regret the glorification. We say this is because when glorification happens in these criminal lives, it gives the idea that criminal life is a way of escaping your problems. When the public cannot draw the line between no alternative, the worst measures, and bad measures, which do have some bit of alternatives, glorification makes it so that these individuals just turn to crime life, even if they do have an alternative. That's why we regret, because people on their side on our side would at least look for safe alternatives, even if they have like bad measures. On their side, even if they have bad measures and they have alternatives, they wouldn't look for that because this glorification justifies these criminal lives. Before then going on to the comparative and some basic weighing, I'm going to rebut their main case, which is under the idea of oversimplification. Their main premise over here is that people don't look at the backstory of these criminal ways of life. But the simple response over here is that these criminals in the series have very extreme reasons to justify their criminal life. We say that Heisenberg, instead of like making a whole drug empire and creating a bunch of these people, he could have just gotten another job. He could have just worked more for his family. But even at our worst, where we say this wasn't effective, he shouldn't have killed like dozens of people. He shouldn't have like portrayed his like brother and whatnot. He shouldn't have betrayed his family. These are very extreme reasons to justify criminal life. We say that when you glorify these extreme reasons for criminal life, this actually enhances the idea on how criminal life is just okay. But second, notice how Op is very confusing. Because Op seems to promote the idea that as long as you are poor, mass murder is okay. If they really do want their education, we should be definitely teaching people that killing is not okay. No matter how much money that no matter how much money that you don't have, you shouldn't kill anybody because that you're taking away more of someone's life. But moreover, if they really want to argue that mass killing is justified, they make a repeating cycle. This is because the reason why you are poor is oftentimes because someone robs you. The reason why you create a cycle of violence is probably because someone killed you. That's what often happens in these poor neighborhoods. If someone kills you, you want to take revenge in them because you think that this criminal life is glorified. This is a cycle of violence that happens on their side of the house because on their side of the house, they don't look for safe alternatives. They don't look for forgiving anyone or whatnot. They obviously only think, oh, I should go to criminal life because I'm glorified that way, because it is justified to kill someone because my mother or my father has also been killed. They create a cycle of violence. At the end of the day, if they really do want education and a safer society, they ultimately do not achieve that. The comparative is very clear then. On their side, they spread the idea that when times get to the worst, you should turn to evil. On our side, we say even though times can still be desperate, you should never turn to evil and instead look for responsibility and just safer alternatives. Why is this better on our side of the house then? Even if we say that these criminals are only evil because they have no choice, that's the we say even if we say that these criminals are the only evil because they have no choice, that's their only way of escaping the problem. We say because of how society interprets things as whenever you do something bad, which you do have like an alternative, criminal life is justified because the majority of these crimes that happen are because people misinterpret how desperate they really are. Oftentimes they commit crimes to try and escape an alternative, to escape their problems. They feel like they're helpless even though they're not. For example, even when you are poor, instead of looking for a job, you're probably on their side of the house in the status quo. They probably instantly turn to crime to try and steal or whatnot without even looking for a job in the first place because these crimes are justified in their side of the house. If they have a backstory, if they have like some reason to steal because they're poor, they would steal on their side of the house. Why is this? This is because we say that glorification makes it so that people have the thought of crime whenever it turns bad to them. Instead of looking ways for getting rid of the problem, even if you do have the capacity, they don't, because criminal life is justified life in the status quo, people don't have a priority of solving their problems with legitimate solutions. Instead, they justify crimes as a way to escape their problems. In the counterfactual, on our side, it is that more people find the true problem because we say a criminality life is never the answer. Instead of having a criminal life as a way of escaping your problems, they find their own solutions. We say this is just far better because at the end of the day, if you at least look for different alternatives to try so that you don't have to mass murder, mass like rob like a bank or whatnot on their side. They seem to support this. That's why they do not achieve this. But even at our worst, before going on, then let's take a POI if they actually have one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think that was plenty enough time for engagement, yet they still disagree. Let's talk about at our worst. At our worst, even if we say that this criminal life was the only way for them to escape their problems, we are still better. Because oftentimes these criminal ways or these ways of social discourse of saying, oh, criminal life might be justified in these different times, we see these are just far worse. Because if we look in terms of how much magnitude or how much people or vulnerable people that you are killing, we say because criminal life does not only harm others. For example, things like murder or like robbing someone, it does not only harm others, which also have third-party arms, but it also harms the vulnerable individual thinking that they want to do crimes. This is because if you get caught, excluding like the third-party arms, for example, like robbery, murder, and all those different other crimes, it also harms the vulnerable individual because these are the worst ways to actually solve your crime. That means on their side of the house, what happens over here is that these vulnerable individuals ultimately have no way of solving their problems. All they do is they try doing crimes, and at the end of the day, they go to jail because of how they are doing criminal life, and they just have to harm others. We say if you have an alternative, you should take it. Their side does not support this. That's why we are just far better, because this is bundle plus one. Because we tell them look for alternatives first. Without this glorification, it doesn't make it so that people like have a sense to like rush their criminal life because it's justified. Because a lot of these days, people think that criminal life is the best way to solve your problems, but that's not. Because on top of the third-party harms that I mentioned, you also get yourself into jail, or you also get yourself into trouble. That means at the end of the day, what have I proved to you? I proved to you on their side of the house that oftentimes these scenes are very extreme, and like the public cannot engage properly. No one actually has like these incentives. No one actually has these like very worst to the worst circumstances. Instead, they have some bad circumstances, but then it's still able to actually solve the problem. On our side, we at least prove them and say that you should look for alternatives first. That's where we're better, because we have a far better likelihood of stopping the crime when for the poor and vulnerable. Therefore, these reasons, very proud to be on side pro.
Judge what they are going as a soft case by saying that the series make it so that we root for the criminal. But even if we accept the soft case that they make, we still take this debate home, because this represents the minorities and the hardships that they have to make them grow up into a criminal, addressing the structural problems of where criminals sprout from, giving the government an incentive to solve these structural problems. With this, their whole case falls down. Moving straight into rebuttals, so they rebutted to our point about oversimplification, saying that they have extreme reasons to create these drug empires. And they said that we're creating this perception that as long as they're poor, killing is okay. First, this is not true. We do not justify killing on our side. We say that glorification doesn't necessarily lead to justification. There's no mechanism on this point in the first place that side government gives to us. Second, even if we say that this is true, this addresses the structural problems that we have in society right now of where criminals sprout from, giving the government an incentive to fix the problem in the first place, which is beneficial to our side. What does side of government give you? They give you nothing. It's just the status quo that they're talking about. Nothing is happening.
Why?
Talk about how times are desperate and never, even though when times are desperate, they should never turn to evil. Then how does their side help with the minorities? The structural problems are not addressed on their side. At least we are trying to address this in the first place. We're trying to address this problem so that the government can stand out to solve this problem. Their side gives nothing. Their side is just saying that, but you should never turn to crimes. But what these minorities face is that they just have to stereotype. They cannot get employed. Those criminals who rob, steal, kill, it's because they are having these problems, and that's why these structural problems need to be addressed. And second of all, we never justify killing. Yes, I'll accept your POI.
If you are poor, you can at least if you are poor, you can at least try to get a job. Your side makes these people go to criminal life because
No,
glorification
we
backs their
never
actions.
justified. Just please listen to my speech. I never said, first of all, you have no mechanism of how we just justify criminal. And second of all, just saying that we glorify this doesn't mean that it's justified. This is just on your soft case that you made that we make them root for the criminals. On our side, we show all of the background information of why they came to be. So that is why your POI is just outruled. And second of all, even like they don't have the chance. What does your side give? There's still crimes on your side because what happens is they cannot get the jobs. They're not employed. They cannot get the jobs. And even though they have a job, they don't have enough earning to support their family. That is why they turn to crimes in the first place. Please listen. And please, you're not solving any problem that we have in the status quo. And they also talk about their counterfactual of how they find the truth and the criminal is never the answer. People already know that. They're not dumb. They already know that being a criminal is not the answer. How is it any different from the status quo? What is the mechanism that you have for this? And people already know that. They're just doing it as the last resort. They steal. They steal and rob because that's the last resort. They cannot earn a lot of money from the job they currently have. That is why they turn to criminal life. It's not because we promote this. And glorifying necessarily doesn't lead to justifying them because you don't understand. I'll explain one second. Because A, there's no mechanism for why this, but B, even if we bite the bullet, we say that glorifying actually solves the problem, like later on elaborated in my third argument. And before I move on, one point to clarify. Judge, the opposition is debating on the premise that we justified the crime, so they just wasted their total 14 minutes. But in our LO, we already have stated that they're taking a soft case, then that we are not justifying the crime, that they have no mechanism. So if they take this case any further, their whole case falls down because this is not the case. Moving on to our third contention on how this represents the minorities. First of all, it introduces previously stereotyped characters. There are stereotype characters that society believes will make more criminals, such as currently the black. The black are perceived as having more higher crime rates than other people. By showing these programs, we address the structural problems and create this community idea that we should help the minorities. And this represents the problem minorities have currently in the status quo that side government is not addressing at all. Then what is the impact of this? This addresses the structural problems we have. So the structural problems play a big role in creating criminals in the first place. By addressing this in these series programs we make it so that the audience will be moved by the problems, giving government an incentive to solve these structural problems, overall helping the minorities, which creates a positive society. No, thank you. And second of all, before I move on, like their PO, what they just like before like. So first of all, please listen to our speeches, and second of all, they keep talking to us about how crimes are justified. We don't think this is the case because if we just make a movie and glorify that doesn't mean we justify that, right? We never say crime is a good option. We never say people already do know the consequences. They already do know the consequences, which means that they won't be justified. Even if they think that's justified, that's because of the structural problems we have. We need to solve the structural problems rather than trying to just cut down their only hope. And second of all, we never say that criminals the only option. We constantly repeat, we constantly tell you that criminals, they just do criminals because that's the last resort they only have. And it's the same on both sides. On our side and on government side, it's the same. They still, even though we don't glorify the movies, there's still going to be criminals made. It's because that's the last resort, and government does not solve any of this problem. What we do is we solve this problem actually making it so that we solve this problem by actually making it so that they actually just see these problems and see that criminals, they live a good life, but there are the consequences, so we should not do that. They don't feel that I should become a criminal. And because of this, the government feels the urgency to address the structural problems, which is why our case stands and their case falls. And second of all, there's no response on how the ending is bad and it gives a moral lesson. So first of all, the ending is bad, and why does this help? Because it actually gives a moral lesson for why this should not happen. This explains the consequences that you have. And second of all, this analyzes physiology behind the crime. The crime they show only focused on the good guy, as our LO has explicitly said. They try to get the best actor to represent them, and the bad guy is not characterized and described in detail. They only tell what the bad guy is doing. The bad guy is background story and where these acts come from. Like they never describe that, right? So they're overly simplified. We don't understand why this holds true for both sides, but we are not overly simplifying that. We're actually showing it to the public that this should not happen, and this is the structural problem. So government should address that. They don't do anything judge. And in government, they just cite the social discussion doesn't happen because they don't do a lot of glorification, which none of the benefits we have on our side helps. And we want to help these minorities flourish. We want to help them. As side government, what they're doing is just cutting down. Like they're not going to address this problem in the first place, which is not happening in the status quo. We believe we help the minorities better. More than proud to oppose. Thank you.
Straight going on to rebutting their model about how it's too oversimplified, going on to first clash about principle, second clash about individual change in general. Okay, first going into the rebutting of the model, right? They talk about it's too oversimplified and people have the capacity to say distinct fake or not. Some people don't, but these are the people that we are talking about. Even if not drugging, that is the extreme case, harsh language in general, immoral behavior, etc., it smears into your blood without you realizing. Unlike social infrastructure, and unlike the problems that people need to study about to realize, immoral behavior you don't need to study immoral behavior. It smears into your blood while you are watching the movie. You now know harsh language, the immoral behavior, etc. And also in the extreme cases, why would people look for alternatives when crime like crime like robbing other people to get easy money are justified by the public, at least inside the movie, right? We believe that as the opposition is also debating in an extreme case scenario, we benefit more here. But even if that is not the case, even in our worst case, we believe that still immoral behavior will smear into your blood, unlike social problems, which they don't actually get to learn in educating in the first place. First, to clash about principally just. Then proposition talks about it is principally unjust. They give two responses. Firstly, about how you get to know the problem. This is their argument. I'll rebut to this later. Their second argument was how about it's a moral lesson. When they literally say the media is for comedic purposes in their first speech, why would they learn moral lessons? This goes to all of their claims. This is really inconsistent in their whole case. Their education stands, but ours doesn't. This makes zero sense. Secondly, even if this stands, moral lesson to what? Sure, maybe bad turn out to bad, but this is inexclusive in our side as well. Our side cuts the line even clearer because bad always turns out bad, rather than giving them a process to say, oh, it's the main character of our movie, but it eventually turns out bad. Boo-hoo, right? This is not a clear line for people to clearly understand. Our side always says that bad is bad, never making them the main character that is good, can be perceived and misunderstood to be good in the first place, right? The point we're trying to prove is that justifying criminals for just even a second is unjust in the first place. It is morally unjust to justify criminals' actions for even a second to make them the main character. But even if making them the main character, to make them the hero of the movie, to make them seem their actions are actually heroic in the sense that they came from smaller backgrounds. Furthermore extended to this, criminals in these movies generally do a lot of bad actions, such as we talked about robbery, having cocaine and stuff, having these all of kinds of bad stuff. We believe that the standard of good and bad is extremely unclear in the opposition side. How does this look like though? This is because at the end of the day, right? When good and bad are not clear here, this is because the model of opposition is basically oh, these people were good but they turn out bad, and it's really sad to us because they're the main character. This is a really unclear line, especially children and teens who hit puberty, who are generally think that bad guys narrative, which is incredibly popular inside teens right now, is generally a cruel stance. We believe even if this is not high propensity, where both sides are not debating about high propensity scenarios, we believe that we impact more here because justifying criminals and having an unclear stance is extremely harmful to children and teens that cannot understand society in the first place, right? Yes?
Then what does your side do to prevent the structural problems we have? Nothing is currently happening to stop the structural problems on your side.
Okay, I'll talk about structural problems later, right? It comes out right here when I rebut the opposition case of an oversimplification. Firstly, people only see the backstories as a to luring them in. This is basically a progress of story. They don't care about what, how, where it happened. This is just reasons for you to be incentivized to justify their actions. What does this mean? This means that people generally don't care when they go to see the movie about structural reasons about how our society is turning back. Like, I don't go to the movie. Like, for example, let's say I see Breaking Bad. I don't go to the movie to see why society turned out this way. I go to see actions. Like, if their case completely falls in this way, while immoral actions, like I said, smear in your blood, it comes to you more naturally than understanding social problems, which you need education for, which means that more misinformation could happen in their side when you don't educate these people about anything and say, this is the problem, Josh, this is a problem society has. Like, when people don't know, they're more likely to spread misinformation or create echo chambers about this. Social discourse can turn out in bad ways, extending further on this about how when people don't exactly know what the crux of these social problems is, just talking about them doesn't solve the problem. Secondly, more misinformation, right? Profit-driven companies are likely to exaggerate or misrepresent the actual problems of society. The backstories that come out in movies are generated for the purpose of attraction of people. These are likely to be fake. For example, poor home leads to no home, more stereotypes and discrimination to actually exaggerate why these villains became villains in the first place, why these criminals became criminals in the first place, exaggerating individual efforts, exaggerating social problems. This leads to more information, extending to the point that Claire Daniel said, and also about the echo chamber thing and bad social discourse that I said in my speech, right? So what's the weighing here? If all the metrics are for education, we are better. When they blur reality, we cut a clear line. This is bad. This is bad for opposition. The problem is that they're trying to tell hard social problems to people who came to enjoy their weekend. We talked about how immoral actions are a natural process. It smears into your brain. People engage to the quote-unquote backstories. This is extremely bad. Immoral actions smear into you without you knowing, while you don't come to the movies to know about structural problems. Don't even care. You're likely to not even care in the first place. We know that this is extremely unlikely, and better education, if that is the metric of this debate, happens in our side as well. Going on to second clash about the individual change, we talked about how it's impressionable to the vulnerable, about how there's a lot of bad impacts happening. Often talked about how people can know about the problems. We know that even if, let's say, people know about the correct problems, there's no reason for them to actually there's no incentive for them to fund in slum areas, for them to do something, because at the end of the day, they literally said that they have distinctive ability to say that this is a movie. But at the end of the day, when our site is smears into your blood, it is impressionable to the vulnerable to actually follow this, because it seems like it's easy money. So proud to propose.
Judge, we say that clearly. We're not saying that these criminal wrong acts are just blatantly moral by creating the main character as bad people. Just because there's visualization and exposure to these bad occurrences doesn't mean these acts are just automatically justified. We believe rather than justifying these wrong acts moral, we believe that this rather in the long term creates social discussions that are there to further help rehabilitate these other criminals. Firstly, Judge, GovSide is putting a blind eye onto these criminals and just blatantly asking these criminals to go to better schools and study better and have just stop all of these criminal acts, when currently their governmental system, their media is not even trying to give these criminal chances to explain their actions and to further delve into the mechanism to discuss about the rehabilitation and further help these people thrive and try to solve the problems in status quo. Judge, we believe that the status quo is not doing much in trying to represent these figures, as we constantly said. These figures are just blatantly considered as good guy, bad guy. This is overly simplified because they're not developing into the root causes of crime in the first place. For instance, maybe people distrust law enforcement, so they don't report it to the police. Maybe it really is corrupt in bad neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods where minorities are discriminated. Maybe the reason for why we are doing drugs is not because these people are malicious, but because there isn't proper rehabilitation there in status quo in the first place. Maybe people commit crimes because of poverty. The problem is that media has always basically discriminated against these bad figures, making it no chance of representation in the first place. More than proud to oppose. A couple of rebuttals in the first place. Their whole case falls under the point that we justified these crimes. First, we constantly tell you that you have no mechanism on how these series are promoted crimes. And second, even if it does, we still win because addresses the structural problems which should be fixed to stop the problems we currently have in status quo, and they never rebutted or mechanized any of this in their cases. They say that we share going to make exaggerated movies and backstories. That is not likely to happen because this should have come out in our first and second speaker. But since our team is generous, we will rebut. These backstories are usually just so obvious, like poverty, no money. Societal reflections will still happen. Moving on to our first clash on who promotes deterrence and rehabilitations better. The comparative here is that is it better to delve down into these background stories, helping these crimes to be justified and reasoned as moral, therefore disallowing people to find better alternatives like jobs to help their poverty situation, versus delving down into psychological problems is a better alternative to help these poor people to actually get rehabilitated and actually get real help rather than committing crimes. Here is why Gov's characterization is irrational and why we in our side, we break their mechanism. Our side's second argument was about deterrence, right? Oftentimes, we believe they show and focus too much on the good guy and also try to get the best actors to play the protagonist, to play the good guy, as we constantly said in our LO speech. And the bad guy is often not described anyhow. Nobody talks about the bad guy's backstory, where they come from, what their incentives are, but rather emphasize on the misdeeds of these bad guys, right? So they're oversimplified. That's the problem, okay? For example, we told you in the movie of Dark Knight, the Joker. Yeah, the Joker is considered as, oh, he's the bad guy because he's just mad and crazy. He's just immoral in the first place. That's pretty much it, right? They never talk about why they're crazy or what led them to this situation, creating the prevention of understanding and further fostering empathy and this trying to get like better alternatives to fix the status quo problem. We think that glorification is also important, like our LOs also have stated this. This is because when we say glorification, it actually delves deep into these particular people, like criminals, like why they decided to think that being a mafia member or drug dealer is much better than them studying hard and going into a better college. So it actually analyzes the psychology behind the crimes. So this is really important because we are able to identify root causes of crime and having social discussion and social discourse to vote on better policies, to better care about the problems, to rehabilitate these people in status quo. We believe this is the only true way we could provide better welfare to actually solve the root causes creating these problems. However, then why can't Offside create this exclusive benefit of creating social benefits?
Why?
Yeah.
If you kill a person, you create a cycle of revenge. If you rob a person, you make another person poor. The exclusive harms are that these criminals can go to jail. What's your response?
So as you say, you guys keep on mechanizing on why these people are constantly creating crimes without even trying to delve deep into why these people are committing these crimes in the first place. Therefore, your side doesn't even promote any social discussions to happen in the first place because you just characterize them as bad guy. They're just mad, crazy. You never try to explain and try to find out with politicians and like better policies to actually try help these criminals become rehabilitated. You guys are just constantly demonizing them without trying to have any efforts to try to fix the status quo's problem. Okay, moving on. Why can't OP create this exclusive benefits then? Because the offside never delves deeper into the reasons and the mechanism behind this. 3 analysis under this. Firstly, we believe that from these societal discussions and discourse we create from these backstories, we allow citizens and public to understand and actually delve deep into trying to realize why these crimes and criminals do these certain acts. Therefore, these criminals will be better aware of the alternatives that are there for them. And these criminals are rather having more justification and having more alternatives that actually help them realize why they're doing these crimes, why they're committing these crimes over and over again, why they have justification for doing these crimes in the first place. Their side never characterize on why these problems are solved on their side, and they never state and respond to our mechanism of how there's going to be more social discourse and social discussions that help with policies making and better rehabilitative system. We believe these rehabilitative systems look like rather trying to just demonize these criminals. We're trying to send these people into better rehabilitative systems, like getting better, like try to find out better ways to try to rehabilitate them in order to understand these people, trying to find better alternatives, like actually sending them to better like therapy sessions, sending them to better like institutions and facilities that can actually help solve these problems rather than just constantly demonizing these people. Therefore, we believe because it's very hard for these criminals to actually get acknowledged and represented, and they're just keep on getting misrepresented on their side. Their side does not promote any social discussion, not creating any social discourse, no movement in their status quo, no efforts in trying to change their actions. Therefore, we believe for all these reasons, we are more than proud to oppose. Thank you.
At the end of the day, we can notice that PM speeches till the government speech is made before our speeches on the premise that we are going to justify the criminal's crime. And guess what? We say that these criminals aren't getting like really justified, right? We say that these criminals' crime aren't justified in our side as well. However, we say that what's more important is that our side has more deterrence, and we're actually saying that in the current society, it's getting too oversimplified, right? They may try to explain the harms on their side, on our side, but they aren't explaining their benefits on their side, right, Judge? So they fail to explain why our side doesn't achieve like these kind of deterrents, right? So, however, our side explains some points while it actually give moral lessons. First, we explain why people will try to look at this for entertainment, and people won't think it as like try to imitate that. But second, we say that even though they're influenced in a good way for deterrence, rehabilitation, all those good things, right? So we say that that's the main issue. But first issue about the justification. We say that the government side is just trying to say that like the criminals are the criminals should and the criminal crimes here are justified in our side. And as we said in my first line of in my speech till the end line of our whip speech, we never justified this crime, right? We believe that why is this not justified? We believe that there could be a backstory. We believe this backstory is important. However, we say that it is still not justified because there might be their fault. But what we're saying is that we should know this backstory. Why this societal reflection is important. There's this problem in the societal infrastructure, Judge. We believe that this infrastructure should be fixed through this media. Till now, the media is too oversimplify this by what happened in the real case. However, no one showed the backstory of the bad guy, right? Only the good guy, right? So we believe that this is the problem. We constantly say that this glorification is important. It actually delves deep into these particular people. Op is just putting a blind eye on. So we believe that it actually analyzes the psychology behind the crime. In Gov side, what do? They just don't make a social discussion. What they're doing is actually they're not doing nothing. They're doing nothing in their side except they're actually just exacerbating the problem, Judge. We believe, as we continuously said, what they're doing is they're just putting a shield on their side, and they're not trying to actually directly given a rebuttal to our side, except saying that they're just justifying, right? So we believe that identifying the root causes of crime and having social discussions is important. Why does this not happen on op side? No, on gov side. We believe that if they do not glorify it, the media will not know this. Like if they do not glorify it, there will not be social discussions. If they do not glorify it, there will people will not try to fix this problem, right? Having social discourse to vote on better policies, to better care about these problems, to rehabilitate these people. This is the only way we can provide better welfare to actually solve the root causes creating these problems, right? However, why can't op create this exclusive benefit? Because OpSide never delves deeper into these reasons. They only see the really superficial problems and the superficial just outline and surface of this, right? We believe that these social discussions and discourse we create from these backstories, and we allow citizens to the public to understand and actually delve deep into trying to realize, and they're just looking at a surface level, right? These social discussions could lead to better facilities and institutions for these criminals to try to rehabilitate. We say that there was no response for how it could be used in these educational purposes, right? So if they really want these criminals to find better schools and get better education, they should fix the problems in the status quo in the first place and have better policies for criminals to improve. In their side, we say that therefore there's no rehabilitation, no deterrence, or no benefit in their side. Therefore, I'm more than proud to oppose. Thank you.
Their deputy tells us that they're never saying the crime is justified. Then their exact argument is that they will help minorities because there are no alternatives than crime to them. Their case is so confusing. I hope they read the motion. The motion exactly, I'll read it out to you, is regretting the glorification of criminal ways of life in Syria. So if this debate was not about crimes, what debate are they debating on? They get merely social discussion, social discourse, we get change. I'm very extremely proud to propose. Two questions here. Number one, which side was able to better deliver the correct message to the audience in terms of education? But number two, the impression to the vulnerable, but also stressing the point about glorification in this debate. Number one, which side was able to better deliver the correct message to the audience? See how they take the most untradeable case. Did you see social movements after Breaking Bad? Did you see social movements after Narcos? I don't see any. How can a movie show correct society? We rather told you that even in the worst case scenario of our side, where people are indeed going to talk about crimes, it is about psychological root causing in their side. Why are you uploading minorities through a little movie about something else that's just really, really bizarre that they still haven't ironed down from the very start? We already have done from our deputy. Okay, but that's really charitable, and indeed said that they are able to help the minorities here. But how would that happen, right? Just by saying that minorities need a backstory, an attractive backstory to create crimes, does not mean that you're helping minorities. Here's why it's really funny in their speech. Their whip talks about the root causes of crime and psychology behind the crimes. Just because you talk about what made them have the backstory, how are you helping minority, right? Just because an African American had a poor home and then he started to murder people, he started to do drugs and use cocaine at the best, like it was shoplifting, how is that supposed to help a minority? Even if he said that this ends bad, like how is that helping the minority? They never explain, and then they're asking us to engage. I think we already engaged much terribly from our web. The whole metric that they give us, that they bring up here in this debate, is that which side brings better education to these people. Justifying criminal school education is not education. Although here's why they did not engage. Number one, I already told you in top of my speech where the audience's attention in theirs was shift to actual the reason backstory that they never could justify, rather than the real consequence of what those actions or the crimes actually are. Number two. And second question here is that we all need to acknowledge here that their only standing point in this debate is that they push a social discourse. Social discourse, that's it, right? But what impact did we give you here? Number one, even if we say that nobody's going to commit crimes after their movie, at least we said that this inherently smeared people's blood. Where Jaehoon always told you instinctly, as an instinct for people, even if they just hear immoral behavior in a movie, where they see people choosing those drugs as cocaine as their first reach, as their first priority, it just smears the blood in people, and just literally the immoral mindset that, hey, if there are minorities who, for example, are having a struggling time, they will at least perceive them as a person who look for cocaine, look for drugs. And at the end of the day, we already told you through all of our speakers, 21 minutes of speech, that helping minorities is really really bizarre, because that does not give any propensity now to marginalization in their case. Number two, I'm very sorry to say to opposition that they don't understand glorification. Of course, even if you said that this debate is not about the justification of crime, we said that it's about glorification. Where glorification is when society perceives something as good, and when society perceives something as the best, not the best, but at least somewhere as in the best moral line. This means that even if some a certain character as a main character tries to justify their action, even if they're a minority, even if they have a backstory, but trying to commit crimes, society thinks, hey, because of the social norm that people seem to accept it when they are a minority, when they're having an attractive background, where they have this excuse to do so, that means in the sphere of a glorification debate, this means that we need to prove our proposition of why we need to actually glorifying this value rather lead to harm. We already did that. So many speakers, they only talk about the real facts, show part about how we shouldn't talk about crimes, then the whole argument about crimes. Like that case is so confusing. If you don't want to talk about crimes, your argument should not be about crimes. That's why in this crime debate, please vote for us that actually knows what these crimes are, actually knows that glorification isn't society, what society wants to be educated, what the young generation looks like. That's why I'm incredibly proud to help all of our spectrums of stakeholders in this debate vote proud.